Hello, once again, Pokemon and tabletop friends and players. My name is once again Lance, and I am going to be going over today how encounters work in Pokemon Tabletop Adventures 3. And before we get started, I do want to give a quick shout out to the professor on the Pokemon Tabletop Adventures Discord. They were an instrumental in helping me figure out exactly what I needed to say in uh, basically every video I'm going over, actually, that I'm going to be making. In the last one and in this one especially, they've helped a lot. I'm going to be trying to reach out to them as much as I can. They've also looked at all these videos before they even reach you and given me feedback on how things should go if I need to change anything, re-record anything. So that's a big help, and I want to give them a quick shout out. Thank you, the professor, for helping me out with these. Um, but yeah, once again, we are going to be going over encounters in this video. Encounters are going to be sort of a mixture between players and GMs, really wanting to make sure they understand what's going on. But we're going to be starting with mostly things that are GM related. So if you are a player and you don't really think you're going to be running any games and you don't really want to know what's going on there, then you can skip to this part of the video. I'm putting on a timestamp on the screen right now. And you'll be able to skip directly to when we get into combat and calculating damage and all of that stuff. That's what you're going to be interested in. But for my game masters who are watching this video, hey, come here, come get close. I want to quickly start off that encounters, you really should get in your head, encounters are not always combat related. Some of them are just meeting people and meeting Pokemon and navigating a situation with them. It's not always necessarily, hey, I'm going to battle that Pokemon, or hey, I'm going to battle that trainer. It's, oh, we should help this Pokemon out and figure out what's going on with them. So, a few situations that you could have an encounter be surrounded, be the vocal point of your encounter, rather. You could have a wild pack of Pokemon, like a wild pack of Poochyena or a wild pack of Litleo. You could have a trainer or a group of trainers run into your party. You could have an active territorial battle between two species of Pokemon going on right at that time when your party shows up. It could be Zangoose and Seviper, a tale as old as time there. Or it could be something that you've decided makes sense for your world. There's a Pokemon capturing another Pokemon for its meal. Maybe the trainers want to catch that larger Pokemon, the Pokemon that's capturing, and catch it. Maybe they want to save the smaller one, though. Maybe they want to save the smaller one, and as a reward, you could give that smaller one to one of them if they want to take it on with their adventure. There's also the lone Pokemon who might be intrigued, interested, bemused by the party or their behaviors or items, things like that. Maybe some of them have berries in their pockets, and the Pokemon is really, really interested in them. If you catch it, and other times they're walking straight into the base or nest or den of a Pokemon species. Maybe they're walking into a den where a bunch of Zubat have made their home. Maybe they're going to a den for a lot of dragon Pokemon to live. It's up to you guys on how you want to make your encounters, but one thing you really should focus on when building your encounters, the first thing you should ask yourself is, where is this encounter taking place? If this is taking place in a forest, you're probably not going to want to have a Pokemon like Magmar just wandering around. If this is taking place in the ocean, chances are an Aggron's not going to be just sitting around swimming in the ocean, you know? So make sure you think about what your habitat is and then build your encounter with that in mind. Some of you may not want to do full scale encounters all the time, and that's fair. I don't do them all that much either, but it is a good idea to at least build a few because it creates a lot of meaningful interactions between your players and the world within them, and it can create a lot of fond memories with your party. So make sure to throw in a few every few sessions, and you'll be all set to build a very lasting experience for your party. That said, that's really all I want to talk about in terms of what encounters could be. Obviously, that list I gave you isn't going to be inclusive to everything. There's a lot more you could do. You can come up with your own stuff. It's all up to you. You can also ask the Discord. I know a lot of people in there have given ideas uh, but about what encounters could be. So always feel free to come up with your own stuff or ask others for ideas, and you'll be able to come up with a lot of different and unique encounters for your party. Anyway, it's around this time that I think the players are going to be joining us. Hey, players, you missed a little bit, but don't worry. We're going into the interesting part for you guys now. So, uh, first thing we're going to want to talk about is the turn order when we're talking about combat, you know? Big thing a lot of tabletops do is rolling for initiative. And that is something that PTA actually recently included as an option for playing combat. Obviously, people had homebrewed it before, but now there are officially rules surrounding it. And you can see down here, playing it different. This is not the way that the book originally had it, but it was recently added, and I like it, so I'm going to go over it since I'm just talking about it. Um, the first thing you want to know is it's going to be pretty simple. It's a d20 roll plus the speed stat of whatever person. And you're going to be doing this for every Pokemon and trainer that you have under your control, both as the GM and as the player. If you have two Pokemon out there, but you're only going to be commanding one for the entire fight and you're letting the other one do whatever they want, you still need to roll that initiative for them, and then they'll GM will figure out what's going on with that Pokemon during the battle. So yeah, you're going to be rolling initiative for everyone. It'll be a d20 plus the speed stat. It says right there, speed stat. So that is one way of doing it. You're going to be doing the same thing whenever a new Pokemon enters or a new character enters. Maybe the party was split and a trainer walks in and needs to roll initiative. However, there is the original way that PTA had turn orders set up, and it was something I didn't love a whole lot, but it is something that some people do prefer. But it's pretty basic. You're taking the character's speed stat and you're just putting it into the table, and whoever's faster goes first, and then it goes down the list. It is just taking the speed stat and making that the number. Obviously, some people don't love this. I didn't love it personally. I felt it diminished a lot of what the slower Pokemon could do, made them a lot less useful. This gives a chance for them to actually go first in some instances where maybe their opponent has a really poor roll and they have a good roll. So it's entirely possible, but you're going to be going through that order every round, so just keep that in mind and know how fast your Pokemon are going. Alright. Next up, there's a few free actions that all people can take. All trainers, all Pokemon, anyone can take. We don't have a list of them here, but those can be taken at any time. You can see here, start the round, during a user's turn, during when someone else ends their turn, or uh, you can like decide when you're gonna do it. If the free action is specifically, oh yeah, you do this during one of your friends' turns, then you're going to be able to do it at that time. However, there's not just free actions, you gotta go down here to trainer turns. So this is going to be all about what trainers can do during a turn of combat. So as you can see, there's movement, which is all pretty standard, but every trainer, regardless of their speed stat, is going to be able to move 30 feet per turn. Sometimes they might be in varying circumstances where they aren't going to be able to move that, like if they're in difficult terrain or they're trying to uh, climb something, like it says here, climbing a tree. There's different circumstances that may take away from that number on a specific turn, but it's always going to be a base of 30 feet. Moving down here, we've got using a feature. This is going to be your class features. If you have a class feature and you want to use it, you think it's going to be useful in this specific circumstance, you'll be able to use your feature on the turn. It'll be your action, and unless it specifies otherwise, sometimes they're reactions and you're going to have to wait until someone else does something, and it will specify what that reaction is supposed to be too. Obviously, you have using items and interacting with the environment. If you guys wanted to make a skill check on something, that's when you would do it. It would be your action. If you wanted to heal your Pokemon, use a potion on them, that's going to be a action as well. Next up, we have Pokeballs. This kind of goes under the use an item thing, but I wanted to make specific note of Pokeballs. So, Pokeballs can be used twice as an action. Once to recall a Pokemon, and once to send out a Pokemon. You can send Pokemon out of a Pokeball from up to 30 feet, but your return range is actually 50 feet. So if you are running away as you send a Pokemon out, and that distance grows a little bit, you still have a little bit of leeway, so you can call them back pretty easily. However, I do want to note, you can only recall a Pokemon if they haven't acted this turn. Or if they're unconscious. If they've taken a turn and they're unconscious, then yeah, you kind of have to. You can also do a free swap at the end of each round. So once everyone has gone through and we go back to the top of the order, you're going to have the chance to switch out an unconscious Pokemon for a new Pokemon. Or if you don't have a Pokemon out yet, you can throw out a new one. Next up is the final part for the Pokeball section, and this is the one I think a lot of people were looking forward to, because this can get a little confusing. So I'm going to try to be as clear as I can. This is about catching Pokemon, and I'm going to have a whole section going over it later on. But Pokeballs can be used as an item to catch wild Pokemon. The steps included are going to be the accuracy check, and then it's going to be that's going to be a D20 plus your speed stat, whatever the trainer's speed stat is, the modifier, excuse me, the speed modifier against the target speed stat. So if you're facing, I don't know, a Turtwig, I know that's a 4 off the top of my head. If you're facing a Turtwig and you're trying to catch it, it's going to be your d20 plus your speed modifier against that Turtwig's 4 speed. So I hope you have a modifier of 3, because then you just get it automatically. But that's not always going to be the case, Of course, this step does get skipped with a K, skipped if the target is below 50% of its max health. If the Pokemon has 36 health and it goes down to 18, it is automatically able to be hit by a Pokeball. The second part of this catching process is on the GM, actually. GMs. I will go over this in greater detail, as I said earlier, but you are going to have to calculate the catch rate of any Pokemon your party is trying to catch in combat. Alright? I'll go over what affects that later, but know that you are going to have some math to do when Pokemon are getting caught. The third step, once that is calculated, is the trainer making a roll. A D100 roll, actually. And that roll is going to be whatever is lowest is the best. If you hit a 0, congratulations, you caught every Pokemon under the sun. Unless plot forbidding, you know? So if you hit a 0, proud of you. If you hit a 1, you got a really good shot. If you hit a 60, depends on the Pokemon and the circumstances around it, you know? Lower is always going to be better. That's why if you look at the items, I don't have it pulled up, but if you look at items and you look at the Pokeballs, the different Pokeballs, there's the basic, which is a +5 to your capture roll. That's why. +5 is actually a bad thing. It's adding to the likelihood that you won't be able to catch your Pokemon. That's why Ultra Ball is, I think it's a -5, which is that's why it's good. So you always want to have your catch roll be lower than the catch rate. I'll go over how to calculate those in a little bit in more specific detail, but that is something you should know. Finally, for trainer actions, we're going to be talking about their ability to attack. This isn't going to happen often unless you're taking the martial artist class or the psychic class, which are both extra content. They're both in the second PHB book, so they're not they're official but not required. So if that's going to be a question for your GM if you're allowed to go play that. But if you are, then you can make your attack with one of those features. If you aren't, then you can try like kicking or hitting them with a stick or something like that. That's usually going to be a 2d6 damage roll, similarly to Pokemon. But unlike Pokemon, if a trainer attacks, they can still move afterwards. But again, this isn't going to happen often. You're not going to be having trainers punching and kicking Pokemon all that often. It's not going to be something you think about. So don't worry too much if you forget about this. Just always come back to the book and be like, oh, wait, how does this work again? And you'll be able to figure it out pretty quickly. Moving down to Pokemon turns. They have some pretty similar things to trainers. There's actually a lot of similarities, but there are key differences to keep in mind. So if you are moving your Pokemon, you're going to be using their speed stat times 5. So if you have that Turtwig from earlier, 4 times 5 is 20, so they can move 20 feet. It's not a whole lot for some Pokemon. Some Pokemon are just naturally going to be slow and not going to have a whole lot of movement. But others, they're going to be moving ridiculously quickly. A Pokemon with 12 speed going to have 60 feet of movement. It's going to be insane. So always keep that in mind. But anytime they attack, they won't be able to move after that. The attack is the last thing a Pokemon will do in their turn. Alright. Next up, we've got using a skill. That is an action that some Pokemon can do. Skills are things, we covered it slightly last time in the character creation video, but that is going to be things that Pokemon can just naturally do. Things like Fountain or Zapper, things like Guster, that kind of thing is going to be using a skill. So if you ever want to use a skill, that's going to be your Pokemon's action. They won't be able to attack, but they'll be able to continue moving afterwards. Next up, you have items that Pokemon could be using. That will take an action to activate. Some will, some won't. Some are just automatically done. Others are just constant. So it depends. Read your item descriptions for that specifically before you decide to use your items, all right? Because if it's an action, maybe you want to think twice about that. Maybe you don't. Maybe you really want to use that item, but it's up to you. And finally, we have attack, or the action attack. Pokemon have many different attacks. We covered a lot of this last time, but I'm going to go over a bit more specifics today. So, to calculate an attack's damage and or hit, first you want to look at what type of move it is. A lot of moves, if we go over here, will have this section that is very important for you to read anytime you want to use an attack, because they're going to be what you want to use to figure out what you're doing. If it says melee, you've got to be within 5 feet of the target. If it's range, look at what the range is, and you have to be within that amount to hit. Next, we're going to actually skip over the type and go over to this part. We have attack, and we have special attack, and we have effect. These are all very crucial things to keep in mind when making your attacks. This is because this will directly affect your accuracy check. When rolling accuracy, you're going to be using the D20 plus whatever category the attack's modifier asks for. For example, you have a scratch, that's going to be an attack, so that's going to be a +2 on Charmander here. Special attack is going to be a +3, so Ember will be +3 on the accuracy. Meanwhile, Smokescreen is an effect move, so that's going to be a +3 as well. Keep this in mind, it's very important, because that's also going to go against whatever your opponent's, your target's stat is that is defending against that. For attack, it'll be defense. For special attack, it'll be special defense. And for effect, it's going to be speed. Next up, we're going to go into rolling damage. So Ember, as you can see, is a 1d12 on damage. All that means is that you're going to be focusing entirely on rolling that d12 and then adding the modifier. And then adding stab, because Ember is a fire type move. That will be a d12 +4 for stab, because stab is always going to be +4, unless otherwise specified. But yeah, you've got your stab, which is +4. You've got, on this example, +3 for special attack, and you've got the d12. So figure out that damage, and you'll be all set to know how much damage you're doing to your opponent. I do want to go back over to rolling to hit, though. If you roll a 20 naturally on your accuracy check, that move is a critical hit. And the way critical hits work in PTA is going to be max damage for any attack, period. So, in this example, we have a d12 that turns into a 12 automatically. Then you have the +4 and the +3. That's going to be 19 damage for a critical hit Ember. For Ember specifically, you've got an extra effect. You can figure out those just by reading them. You'll be able to figure all of them out pretty easily just by doing that. Now, I did skip something very important when talking about what type. No, I'm doing that again. Now, I did skip something very important when talking about damage. Super effective and resisted moves. This is something that is very different from what you might expect in PTA. For PTA, if something is super effective, meaning in the games it would be a ×2, that would be +1 die. So let's say I'm using Ember against a grass type move. Ember is automatically going to be bumped up to a 2d12. Right out of the gate, a lot more damage, potentially. If it's something like I'm fighting a Pharaoh Seed, though, which is times 4, it's going to be plus 2 die. So this would turn into 3d12. Really quickly, we're adding up things to a point where they're going to one-shot really anything that would hit, you know? Even the weaker moves like Ember. But going the other way, if it's resisted, if we're using this against a Piplup, you will reduce the die by 1. So, a lot of people will ask, wait, does that mean I'm just doing the modifiers? Yes, that's exactly what that means. You will lose the d12, and you will do just the plus 4 and the plus 3 from your modifiers for stab and for special attack. So, you'll be doing 7 damage on not very effective damage with Ember on water types or anything else that resists fire, you know? For shielded damage, this is what PTA calls the quad 4 resistance that a Pokemon might have. Like Charizard is going to be quad 4 resistant to grass in the games. That's shielded damage. That's what it's called in PTA. That is going to be minus 2 die. Now, there's not really a good example for this with Ember, but if you're using Scratch on an Aeron, which is Steel and Rock, those 2d6 are gone, and you just have the plus 2 from the attack stat. Another thing to keep in mind is that some Pokemon types are immune to other Pokemon types completely when it comes to damage. For example, Ghost types, they're not going to be affected by Scratch or by any fighting type moves you might have at all. So keep that in mind when you're choosing what to do. That does not affect the moves, though. For example, if you wanted to use Smokescreen on a Ghost type, you'd be able to do that regardless of the interaction between normal and Ghost type. That immunity only affects damage unless it is specified by the move. So that is pretty much all you need to know about calculating damage. And I'm pretty sure that's all we need to know about combats, too. Once you've fainted a Pokemon, they're fainted for the foreseeable future. But other than that, the only thing we have left is talking about capturing Pokemon. Now, as I said earlier, this can get a little complicated, and it is very important to keep in mind the two different things you're going to be reading when talking about capturing Pokemon. There's going to be one thing that you call a capture rate. That is what the GM worries about. There's the other thing that the players are going to worry about. That's going to be the capture roll. So for a capture rate, I find it best to use an example. So this is what the base stuff looks for in the game. If GMs, you want to change this for however you would like to make it easier or harder for your players to catch Pokemon, go for it. But I'm going to be using the base stats for now just so that I can create an easier picture for you guys. So, in this example, I'm going to have my trainer find a Pidgeotto. And my trainer is going to alert the Pidgeotto to their presence. They're going to be like, hey, there's a Pidgeotto over there. And the Pidgeotto is going to look up and see the trainer. At that point, my trainer will then send out a Pokemon and start to battle it. Few things to note, GMs. Pidgeotto is a common second stage Pokemon. That is going to be 35 on the capture rate. Next up, I'm actually going to do this real quick so you guys can have the math on the sides. So, next up, with that information I just posed, You've got wild Pokemon that are ambushed, which is going to be a minus 25, making
So
it harder
automatically
to catch.
my capture rate is going to be on the
The wild
side here. I'm
Pokemon
not going to be
initiating
calculating
combat,
it right here in
which
front of
will
me.
be pretty
But
even.
the base
And
35
players
and then the plus
initiating
10.
combat while the wild
Now,
Pokemon knew
with
that
my
the players
Pokemon,
were
I'm
there.
going to lower
That's
this
going to be a plus 10.
Pidgeotto down to 6 HP before I attempt to catch it. So, because it is below 10 health, that is going to be plus 20 to my capture rate for this Pokemon. That's pretty good. Of course, if you KO it, then it will be plus 75, basically guaranteeing any normal Pokemon is getting caught. But that comes at the cost of loyalty, so trainers don't do that all that often if you can help it. That said, I haven't afflicted anything to it. If I was using Ember with that Charmander I was talking about earlier, I guess I just didn't burn it ever. But do note that if there were afflictions, only one of these could apply at once. It mentions right here, only the best applicable bonus from each of the above category is applied during a capture check. So, if it's burned, it's a plus 10, but if it's burned and paralyzed, only the paralysis bonus gets added. Alright? Please keep that in mind. That said, I didn't do that to this Pidgeotto, so we're gonna ignore the afflictions category altogether.
Now I'm going to cut for just a moment, but during editing, I'm going to roll a D100, and we're going to use that to see if I caught this Pidgeotto, alright? So I'm going to cut out for just a moment. I'll see you after you see the roll, and hopefully I caught that Pidgeotto. Alright, here we go. Let's catch this Pidgeotto. Well, that's not very good. Alright, so you can see on the left, I've got what the capture rate is, and on the right, I have my roll plus whatever modifiers I'm using for my capture roll. And you guys can tell me if I caught that Pidgeotto or not. I won't know until I'm editing this, so yeah, that's how you catch a Pokemon. That'd be really awkward if I didn't catch that Pokemon, wouldn't it? But yeah, that's about it. I would like to quickly note I didn't talk about this before, but the stage of the Pokemon does matter when you're talking about capture rates as well as its rarity. So keep that in mind when coming up with their capture rates if you have something different from the standard. With that said, though, that is going to be it for this video. I've gone over everything I want to go over in terms of encounter building and how to go through encounters, how to go through combats, different things you'll need to know in combats, a lot of the basics at least. Then I'm gonna head on out. I hope you guys enjoyed this guide to encounters for Pokemon Tabletop Adventures 3. I'm looking forward to the next video. I hope you all enjoyed. If you have any more questions, feel free to join the Discord down in this the description below. Feel free to get all of the resources for PTA 3 in the description as well. And there will be timestamps for everything I talked about down there if you ever need to go back to anything. I did that for my last video as well. I didn't mention it in it, but if you ever need to go back to that video and look at timestamps for anything, feel free to do that in the description. Enjoy your days. Hope you guys have a lot of fun with PTA 3, and I will see you guys on the flip side.